Hi, I'm a Possum and I find garbage, and I just saw Joker, Folie, Deux, the sequel to 2019's Joker, a movie ostensibly set in the DC Comics universe about a mentally ill man who's overlooked by society until he lashes out at it. A bunch of critics at the time said it was dangerous, that it vindicated male rage and appealed to whiteness, that would trigger an incel uprising, which of course never happened, and some even called it racist based on nothing at all. Despite that, or perhaps even because of it, it ended up becoming the highest grossing R-rated movie ever made at the time, and I could see why. A movie about a lonely man who's deeply troubled but gets no sympathy, turning into the monster society always treated him as, and learning to be okay with it because nothing will ever get better for him. Yeah, I think I could see why that would resonate with a lot of people, especially men.
You will get it.
Now, when a movie makes over $1 billion against a budget of $55 million, there's no way a studio is gonna just leave it alone. They're gonna make a sequel, whether or not anyone involved even wants to. So 5 years later, they decided the logical thing to do was turn it into a musical, starring Lady Gaga of all people. Well, gee, what could possibly go wrong? The decision to turn the sequel to Joker into a musical is utterly baffling, and I can't even begin to imagine what they were thinking. What, because he danced down a flight of stairs at one point and muttered a song to himself at the end that justifies making it into a sequel? Or is it because the wrong people liked the first movie for the wrong reasons? Was this movie made out of spite? Because having seen it, it sure feels like it. But it's not even a good musical. As far as I know, none of the songs are original, but they're all just covers of popular songs from the era it takes place in. While they're performed well enough, they don't add anything to the movie, other than I guess maybe they're meant to show Arthur's mental state in the most inefficient way possible. Actually, the songs detract from the experience because most of them are just irrelevant fantasy sequences, which the plot has to come to a dead stop to make time for. And there's a song every 5 minutes. It's like watching a YouTube video, but the ads are unskippable and are each 3 to 6 minutes long. It messes up the pacing and makes the movie a lot longer than it needed to be. And this movie is seriously bloated. It's one of the most bloated, tedious, and self-indulgent movies I've seen since Heaven's Gate. On top of that, there's not really much to the story. Well, first of all, it falls into the common sequel trap of undoing all the character progression from the first movie, which started with Arthur as the world's most pathetic man, constantly getting beat down by society until he decided to embrace madness. But then this movie starts off with him back to his weak and pathetic self again. Character-wise, it's like he never even became the Joker. Now, I understand that might actually be the point, but don't worry, I'll get to that. The plot is mostly centered around Arthur trying to convince a courtroom that he has split personality disorder, and he and the Joker are two different people so he doesn't get the death penalty for all the murders he committed in the first movie. By the way, I don't think he kills a single person in this movie except in fantasy sequences. Most of the movie takes place in the courtroom and pretty much just recaps what happened in the first movie, while explaining things that were kept intentionally vague in the first movie as if trying to ruin it. Like that scene where he breaks into his neighbor's apartment and it's not clear whether or not he killed her. Well, he didn't because she's testifying against him now. And the ending is just insane, and not in a good way. I guess I'm gonna get into spoilers now. There's a part in the movie where Arthur finds out Harley Quinn, who everyone calls Lee in this movie, lied about her backstory, and Arthur has a fantasy where he and Harley are on a TV show where she shoots him in the stomach, reflecting how he feels betrayed by her. This is important. Later, during the verdict reading at Arthur's trial, one of his fans blows up the courthouse and he escapes and runs into Harley on the famous stairs from the first movie. She breaks up with him because she fell in love with the fantasy of the Joker, and this is after Arthur just confessed to the court that he doesn't have split personalities and there is no Joker. So since he no longer has the phony Joker persona compensating for the fact that he's only 5'8", Harley doesn't love him anymore. And then he gets arrested again and sent back to the mental asylum. Now, most of the beginning of the movie is spent at this mental asylum, and we sporadically get close-ups of this seemingly random patient who is always just in the background smiling at Arthur. At the end, this guy, who I don't even think is given a name in the movie, walks up to Arthur and asks him if he wants to hear a joke, and then he pulls out a shiv and stabs Arthur multiple times in the gut. We then get a flashback to the fantasy from earlier, but now we see a continuation where after Harley shoots him, he starts singing a song about how he wants someone to take his place. We cut back to reality and see Arthur fall over and die, while the guy who stabbed him laughs in the background, as if to imply that this nameless character who got like 2 lines of dialogue would take his place as Joker. And then the movie cuts to black. So now, having heard that's how the movie ends, it won't surprise you to know that this movie wasn't shown to test audiences. Oh, there's also a scene where it's implied that a bunch of asylum guards raped Arthur. And it was after this that Arthur decided to drop the act and confess. Yeah, all it took to convince him to stop being Joker was getting gang raped. And it was after that when Harley decided to break up with him, just to add insult to injury. I saw a theory that Joker 2 was meant to be a sort of allegory for how people reacted to the first movie and turned Arthur into a meme representing dissatisfaction with the state of society and turning him into a symbol of rebellion when he never saw himself as such, and Harley Quinn is like an audience stand-in who idolizes the fantasy of the Joker, but doesn't see Arthur for who he really is. Now, I don't know what Redditor came up with this idea because whoever posted the screenshots to Twitter very kindly cropped out their name like the good person they are. But if there's any validity to it, then that just means this movie is yet another example of what I consider to be the biggest problem in modern screenwriting. In this era where just about everything is a franchise, it seems every screenwriter now is most concerned with telling stories about franchises rather than stories set within the universes of those franchises. If you look at the Star Wars sequels, for instance, they exemplify everything that can go wrong with this way of thinking about story. The Force Awakens was practically a beat-for-beat remake of A New Hope, because they wanted to play it safe and just follow a formula they knew would work. The Last Jedi went out of its way to subvert expectations, and killed off the main villain halfway through the trilogy, among several other bad ideas. Then The Rise of Skywalker tried to course correct from The Last Jedi by bringing Palpatine back to life to replace Snoke because they needed something the audience recognized to get them back on board. None of it feels like an attempt to tell a story set in the Star Wars universe, but more like an attempt at some kind of meta-commentary on Star Wars as a franchise. It feels like they were made with a sort of hyper-self-awareness, a lack of self-confidence that constantly draws attention to itself, like an introverted nerd making self-deprecating jokes at a social gathering because he's afraid of what others might think about him, so he makes fun of himself before anyone else can. Every creative decision was based on what they thought the audience either expected or didn't expect from a Star Wars movie, which is something entirely external to the world of the story. That's why nothing feels logical or organic to the story being told. No one can just tell a story anymore. Everything has to be some kind of postmodern deconstruction. Now, everything feels like a parody of itself. It's all this self-aware, fourth-wall-breaking, wink-at-the-audience nonsense which is afraid to be sincere. Joker Folie Deux is just another flavor of that. It's so up its own ass about being a meta-commentary on itself that the story takes a backseat to navel-gazing gibberish that no one cares about. You can fillet yourself to the thought of such vagaries as the audience are exploiters, and everyone sees the symbol but not the man. But at the end of the day, none of that matters because the story that serves as the vehicle for those themes is so poorly told. People always get hung up on themes like they're the be-all, end-all of any story, and act like any story that has themes is automatically good just because it has them, and it makes midwits feel smart when they can identify them. But a theme is little more than an idea, and an idea is not worth anything if it's executed poorly. I have an idea to make a pill that makes my turds come out with the exact same consistency every single time, but I don't have the knowledge or resources to make such a pill, so what good is that idea? It's entirely possible to get something and still think it's bad. But the ironic thing is, the people defending this movie, who say its detractors just don't get it, tweet about it in a way that has me convinced none of them have ever even seen the first movie. People liked the first Joker because they could relate to the idea of lashing out at a society you feel has forsaken you. But now the sequel is showing contempt for those people. How dare they relate to Arthur and his struggle with loneliness and mental illness? How dare they find catharsis in a character becoming the monster society always treated him as, and giving them what they deserve? We're gonna take that character away from them and turn him into a pathetic loser who gets raped in prison and loses the only person who ever loved him, just to spite them. Because, as we all know, mentally ill people deserve to be mocked and humiliated. You can probably imagine that feels like a portrayal, right? You can probably also imagine that intentionally alienating your audience doesn't exactly translate to box office success. You can say this movie was designed to make the incel chuds mad and laugh about it, but at the end of the day, the incel chuds aren't the ones who shot themselves in the foot by spending $200 million on a movie that's flopping harder than Morbius and will probably end up ruining several people's careers.
Get what you f***ing deserve!
I guess that's all I have to say about Joker Folie of Doof. Here's a challenge for the audience. In the comments section, describe what it feels like to fall down a flight of stairs. Whoever gives the best description gets to pick up the soap. And don't forget to like this video, leave a comment for the algorithm, subscribe if you're not already. Check my channel for videos you may have missed since YouTube doesn't always tell you when I upload. Support me on Patreon and send me your fan art. The links are in the pinned comment. Bye.